Eating disorders are the third most common chronic illness among adolescent females in the United States.
So if my gut is unhealthy, my brain is going to be unhealthy.
I had weighed 34 kilos, my worst, and my heart rate was at 33 beats per minute.
Wait, but I can't be excited about food anymore. And that would really mess with my mind, sometimes.
Fruit in the morning, carrots and hummus for lunch, an apple and 2 rice cakes in the evening. Welcome to the She Word, conversations that women rarely have, but really should. I have been wanting to host a show on this topic of eating disorders since I started the She Word. It is a debilitating disease that robs peace, self-love and stability. If you're one of the 8.6% or over 70 million people of the global population who are affected either by anorexia, bulimia or binge eating, then you will know firsthand the prison that eating disorders trap you in. If you're one of the 50% of the population who know somebody who is dealing with an eating disorder and affected by this disease, then you'll also have negotiated the complications of trying to reach and help a loved one affected by an eating disorder. But there is hope. And in this show, we have 2 amazing young women who are going to share firsthand experience and one expert who's made it her job to do all she can to help those who are affected by these diseases to recover. But now, before I get into introducing my guests, of course, I want to just remind you, if you're watching this on YouTube, under here somewhere you're going to find subscribe. Make sure you subscribe to our channels there. Also on Spotify, if you're listening to us, make sure you hit subscribe. And of course, we are also on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Make sure you join us because we have some amazing things coming up over the year. Least of all, I'm going to just mention this incredible event we're hosting at the Phoenicia on the 25th of May. The She Word Unlocking Empowerment brunch event with special guest, international influencer Danae Mercer-Ritchie, keynote speakers, 2 live She Word podcast recordings that you can get involved in, and so much more. This is an event with one aim: to empower women to be everything they can be. And if you're joining us on our Patreon page, I want to just remind you that you are doing something amazing, because our Patreon page subscribers are making change just by joining us there. 50% of our Patreon page subscriptions go straight to the Richmond Foundation to help women who need therapy and cannot afford it. So a massive, massive thank you to you. So it's time for me to introduce my guests. And I'm going to start with Cassandra Galea, who I met recently when we were both completely soaked, having been out in the rain and high winds for over 6 hours. Me as the presenter of the Malta Marathon and Cassandra as running it. I was about to head back to my car to go home, and I spotted you as you were running the last 200 meters of the Malta Marathon, and with absolute determination on your face. It was the worst running conditions ever, and I ran up to you and I said, "Can I run in with you?" And I sort of ran right to the finish line and let you cross the finish line, and I had so much incredible respect. I know I'm a runner. I know what that feels like. But then, a couple of weeks later, I spotted an article that you wrote, "I'd rather be dead than a size 12." And so much of that blog resonated with my feelings that I've experienced personally and still lie in the dark places waiting to rear their ugly head 35 years later. So I want to say a massive thank you for you being here. We're going to have a little bit more about you in just a moment, but first up, thank you so much indeed. And then I was introduced to Dorothy Kerr, who is a clinical psychologist, psychotherapist in private practice, eating disorder specialist, an educational course creator, coaching psychologist. And after chatting to you, I finally knew that after, I don't know, we're at the end of season 4 now, that this show that I wanted to do for so long was going to happen. So I want to say thank you for you being here as well.
Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. And then, Dorothy, you introduced me to Sarah Policino. And Sarah, I'm so glad that you are here because you've been working in therapy with Dorothy in relation to eating disorders and really worked hard on your recovery. I'm going to say this, I know I'm going to get this wrong, but you can correct me in just a second. You're an aerial theatrical dancer.
Yes.
Who's frightened of heights and shares your passion for dance with Cassandra, because you're also a dancer. And you spend a great deal of time suspended way high in the sky. I'm going to stay with you, Sarah, because I want you to fill in some of the gaps. What do you do apart from live dangerously in the skies?
Well, I work in emergency. I'm a radiographer.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay.
It's so I try and avoid breaking my bones, but then I see a lot of people breaking up their bones. So yeah.
So you're a radiographer in emergency, but you are, of course, this amazing. How do I call this? Aerial theatrical dancing, or how do you refer to it?
Well, it's also circus. People call it circus. There's people say aerialist. So yeah.
So this is very much like Cirque du Soleil.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. So hats off to you. Massive amount of respect. And you've worked with Dorothy.
Yeah.
And this is why you are here today, because Dorothy contacted you and asked if you'd be happy to come on the show.
Yeah, and I'm honestly so honored to be here today.
I am honored that you are here, and I'm
Thank you
really,
so much. Thank you.
really excited. We're going to come to your story in just a second. Dorothy, thank you so much for being here. And really, when I spoke to you, it was the beginning of being able to really sit down and have this show, because we need someone like yourself on the program. Tell me what you do, and also just why is this an area of speciality for you? Why a passion?
Yes. It started a long time ago. I went to carry on training for my clinical doctorate in Italy. And when I was at the Department of Neurological Sciences and Psychiatry, and I was always fascinated, drawn to this idea of how is it that these beautiful women, mostly were girls, young girls, end up like this, like how does it happen? And I wanted to know what was going on at brain level, like what is going on here? I need to know it. And that is how I was accepted to train, because not everyone is accepted, especially if you've had a past history of eating disorder and you're not recovered. You cannot help somebody because you will get triggered yourself. And so after completing the studies, then you go and do specialized training. And this is how it happened also, because probably growing up, I knew many. I had friends, who were also struggling with body image, and possibly even myself I had questioned. I'm not tall. I had friends who were tall, so I had this thing like, do I look good? Do I not look good? Do I want to change parts of myself or not? Being in Italy, that disappeared, and probably because the lifestyle over there is so conducive to well-being that you can't not be well, kind of, although eating disorder rates over there are high. And this is, but basically what drew me mostly was, this curiosity. I really wanted to understand it, like what's going on? Why is it reversed? Why is it somebody who's so beautiful to me thinking that they aren't? And why is somebody who is so skinny seeing themselves overweight? And if you show them a picture of themselves in a mirror, they don't see it. So something is beyond logical reason.
I'm really excited that you said that, because we're going to delve into that and that whole idea that you don't see what everybody else sees. I think so many women struggle with that, whether you have an eating disorder or not, whether you go to that far, or whether it's just body dysmorphia, which so many women are affected by today. And we'll talk about that as well. And I'm really grateful that you're here.
Thank you.
I'm coming to Cassandra because I honestly, you've blown me away twice in a month. First, when you were so determined to finish the Malta Marathon earlier this year. As I said to you before, if I was going to be there as a runner, I'm not entirely sure I would have run it, because it was diabolical conditions. And for me to run with you and have that privilege and honor to run with just into the last few meters with you was so powerful, impactful for me. And then, of course, I read this blog and you blew my mind, because instantly I'm back to 13 years old, because this is something that I have experienced myself. So tell me a little bit more about you, because you're also a teacher.
After COVID, I kind of put dancing on the side, although it's still my passion, and I focus more on teaching. So now I'm a drama and dance teacher, and I also teach the Princess Trust program in state school, and which is something I'm very passionate about. Teaching is just so, it's such a wonderful career.
You don't hear that often. You don't hear people saying that often, that they're so passionate about teaching. So actually, 3 times now you said something that I'm really blown away by. And I'm so glad that you could be here. We can talk a little bit about that blog and about your situation in just a moment. But thank you. Thank you for being here. I'm really blown away. So I just want to share with you, lovely, beautiful ladies, just a few statistics that I picked up. I know that you have some more, Dorothy, but the global eating disorder prevalence increased from 3.4% of the population, and we're talking about men and women, because this does affect men, to 7.8% between 2000 and 2018. Now, I also just mentioned 8.6%, which is the statistic for today. So for today, in the last 24 years, we've gone from 3.4% of the population to now 8.6%. It's a phenomenal and staggering increase. Eating disorders are the 3rd most common chronic illness among adolescent females in the United States. 15% of women will suffer from an eating disorder by their 40s or 50s, but only 27% receive any treatment for it. And the most common age onset is between 12 and 25. Although much more common in females, 10% of cases are detected in males. Now, that's of what we know. And of course, if those are the statistics that we know about, there's probably plenty more that we don't know about. So again, I just want to say thank you, because we've got 2 beautiful women who are prepared to talk about this and are prepared to make change by doing so, and Dorothy, who's here to guide us. So I just want to also just characterize what we're actually talking about, because if you're not familiar with what an eating disorder is, there are largely 3 forms of eating disorder, but they are interchangeable. So we have anorexia nervosa, which is characterized by weight loss or maintenance by extreme dieting, starvation, or too much exercise. Binge eating, which means to frequently consume an unusually large amount of food in one sitting. And then bulimia nervosa, with symptoms including purging, taking laxatives, exercising, or fasting to avoid weight gain after binge eating. And as I mentioned before, they're not usually in isolation of each other. They can be interchanged, which at least was my experience. So I want to start off by asking, we're all faced with the ever-increasing and impossible challenge to be slim, beautiful, and to reach unobtainable standards. More so now than ever, which may be why we're seeing these statistics. However, eating disorders are not the same as a strict diet in so many ways, in the behavior, compulsion, addictive nature, and the lengths that someone who is affected by these diseases will go to. So where is the borderline? How do you know when you or someone you love has stepped over the line from just very strict dieting into something that is more serious?
Well, I could reply from my perspective as a psychologist. Basically, the difference is, even when you're talking strict dieting, already there are the signs. Why strict? because diet is what you eat in the day. And in order for somebody to lose weight, it does not have to be strict. I know what you mean by strict. If somebody needs to lose 50 kilos because they need to undergo particular surgery, then there are ways and measures. But nobody should be on a strict diet, which is which is restrained eating, because that is number one cause for an eating disorder. And you know that somebody is shifting towards that end when they socialize differently, where they talk about food all the time, but not in a way because they love it, not because you're a chef or because you love cooking, but because you're preoccupied with the thought of eating, weight, and shape in one form or another. And you will eliminate certain food groups, hoping or believing that you're going to alter your shape or your weight. And then very often I get the excuse depending on the times, sometimes it's because I'm vegan, so it's or vegetarian, ethical reasons, and there because I want to eat raw or because of this. The thing is that what we're forgetting and what there isn't much information about, but it's picking up, is that gut, brain, ovaries, because we're talking women, but men hormonally are connected. So the minute you do not nourish your body, the minute you do not give your body and your brain the nutrients it requires, all of a sudden you get this distortion. This is, the cognitive dissonance sort of, that what I see is not what I am. Because what we don't know is that with eating disorders, thinking maybe anorexia, there is shrinkage of the brain, shrinkage of the womb. And it is reversible upon eating. And then with bulimia nervosa, if there's throwing up, there's, like the whole electrolyte imbalance, and there is disturbance in the gut. So if my gut is unhealthy, my brain is going to be unhealthy. If my teeth are unhealthy, my brain is going to be unhealthy. And this is a whole cycle. And then we disrupt the hormonal system. So yes, therapy will come in, and it's necessary because we need, people who come need to feel supported. Because unless they're feeling held and supported and seeing the change will not happen. So going back to the original question.
I was going to say, because that's the whole show in one answer. We can all go home now and these ladies haven't said anything.
Going back to the original question is, once you recognize somebody as sort of starting, onto the path of eating disorders, when they're too preoccupied, but very often are trying to hide it. Yes.
That's really interesting about the hiding as well. And I'm going to ask both of you ladies, because you both have come out and talked about having a not a positive relationship with food. I'm going to ask either of you, and let's start with you, Sarah, because you have gone to therapy and you've dealt with this. At what point did you recognize that there was a problem?
Well, it was quite late, honestly, because I used to always think that I was okay. As long as I had energy, I was fine. People used to tell me that this wasn't okay, what I was doing, but I never actually believed them.
But what were you doing?
So I was restricting my calorie intake. I had an application. I used to document everything that I used to take. Like a piece of lettuce, an apple, which was crazy at that time, because I used to say this is too much, like a piece of lettuce, it's too much for me today. But I used to do that. When I used to go to school, my mom used to give me a piece of apple in hopes that I would take it, and I used to throw it away. I used to go back home telling her that I ate the apple. People were telling me, listen, why are you throwing away your food? And I used to be like, no, I don't feel like it today. But in reality, I couldn't take it because I was so scared of taking those extra calories. I said extra because they're not, but
But so then my question would come to you, how long was that going on? And how did you realize that was not a situation that could be maintained, that you had to go and get help?
Well, at first my period stopped And my mom was getting so concerned, apart from the way I looked, because I had weighed 34 kilos, my worst.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was very worrisome, you know. We went for some blood tests, and the doctors took my heart rate, and my heart rate was at 33 beats per minute. And that's where the doctor was so concerned that he said that we need to admit Sarah as soon as possible to the hospital. That's where I realized that something was not right anymore. I was doing extremes now. And that's where I realized that I had the problem.
See, you said something, and I saw Kaz over here nodding, and there was something that you wrote, and we'll come to this piece that you wrote, which resonated with me, because you just mentioned about writing it down.
Yeah.
Now just to give you guys an idea, I was doing the same thing when I was struggling with anorexia and bulimia, then anorexia and bulimia 35 years ago. We didn't have apps. I'm that old, but I was still doing the same thing. I was allocating myself 300 calories a day, and I can't tell you what it is in kilos. I got down to six stone, so I can't tell you what that is in kilos. But that was for somebody who's 5'7". That is not a good weight to be. Very, very low. But I restricted myself, and I was about 9 months on a 300 calorie day diet.
Yeah.
And again, saying to myself, you know, how much is there in lettuce? Can I put an apple, and doing that math? But this is, Kaz, this is where you, through your writing, you blew me away, because, and I keep mentioning, you took me right back there, because this is what you were doing as well.
I wasn't as long term perhaps as Sarah. I was very aware about you know, that I'm dancing. I should eat. And when I was younger, I was leaner, and I could get away with a bit more. But however, the comments from certain people were still there. You know, from people who I looked up to, they were still there about my body, that I should weigh, you know, in the 40s. And things like this.
But you're tall.
I mean, if 5'4" is tall.
Well, it's tall enough that 40s is...
No, definitely. It's crazy. And, you know, for example, there would be comments about how our photos were photoshopped. There was a comment how I had a picture in a certain pose, and that I wasn't tucking in, and I looked 6 months pregnant, you know, these things. And in hindsight, I do say that this is insane, you know. And however, in a way, I was lucky that I didn't let these affect me so much in my eating back then. But now that I see myself perhaps heavier than before, my mind tells me I'm a failure, because that was the ideal body, and now that I'm not that way anymore, it's like, this is what ruins me, you know. Maybe the eating habits are secondary to that, but knowing, like, seeing myself in the mirror, seeing certain pictures that are taken, like at the finish line of a race that I ran a couple of weeks ago. My friend sent me my photos because I didn't want to look at them. I felt so, like, my face is swollen, my arms are...
What if you could start your journey over? Start here and start again there. That's how life works, in a circular way. We understand the importance of circles, and that's why you are at the heart of ours. Find your way to wellness with Browns.
But this is where it comes to the logic, and you talked about it just a moment ago, because if you're referring to, I presume you're referring to the close of the Malta Marathon.
That
race.
And even a race a couple of weeks ago, a Pembroke race.
And nobody should ever look at a photograph at the end of the race
Yes,
with
yes,
anything that is judgment, because you've just run. And that in itself does strange things to the body and face shapes and light. We're going to talk about this as well. But I know that I can say that till the cows come home. If you're in that position, it doesn't matter what anybody else says, because I've had these comments to myself too. It's what's inside that is really haunting you. It's what's inside that you are having to live with, not what somebody else is saying about you. I want to touch on something you just said there, and I want to ask Dorothy a question as we go into this journey, because the cause of anorexia nervosa or other eating disorders, as I have been investigating, is rarely about food or weight. And even if, and body dysmorphia, which is what you're describing
It's an
there.
associated disorder, yes, body dysmorphia.
But it's from what, if you look online, what it will tell you, of course, Dr. Google is always right, but it's about unresolved negative emotions, maybe past traumas that result from complex entwining relationships between social, biological, and physiological factors, which can be deep-rooted within the individual since early childhood. Now, the reason I mentioned about this, because before we came on to the show, we were talking about, you've just run a marathon. To run a marathon, there's like 0.01% of the population, of the global population, can do this. This is not something that people can do. And you're going up in the sky, and you're doing these beautiful Arab circus performances and so on and so forth. And that takes insane amount of self-discipline. But even when I was reading your writing and you were talking about the fact that you were lowering what your body was intaking and feeling so hungry, and you've just mentioned the same thing yourself, that takes a lot of self-discipline, which is not something that everybody can tap into. So my question to you, is that right? Is it the knitting of social, biological, and physiological factors? What makes somebody have the perfect storm to have a weakness for eating disorders, rather than somebody just saying, I'm going to go on a diet?
Yes. Well, it's definitely, I always like to say it's multifactorial, sort of. So number one trigger would be somebody restricting their eating. Then if they happen to be vulnerable, and what would make somebody vulnerable? So we both mentioned discipline. So there's a trait or brain type, if we want, like if somebody is very determined, determination can be taken into the reverse, the negative. I could be determined to go up in the sky, and I could be determined to finish the marathon, but I can be determined to lose that weight, and nobody's going to come into my way. Now, it depends then where you're coming from. What I mean by that sort of is, what is your family background, traumas that we could have experienced. As a matter of fact, we always have to assess for trauma. There are specific questionnaires, and we need to see whether somebody has experienced multiple small traumas throughout their lives and there was no support, or one large trauma that maybe they have kept in and now they are transforming into an eating disorder. And you tell me how, where is the equation? So if somebody tends to be also sensitive, so one of my research showed that people who develop an eating disorder very often are rather sensitive people, and they pick up emotions, like at the boundaries. They're very sensitive, they feel, they know, they store, and they haven't as yet learned not to keep it in. So then a comment, somebody will tell me that comment. Some will say, well, why don't you look at yourself in the mirror? And somebody else would take it home and make it real, make it become their own. Then let's imagine that this teen or older woman, or whichever the age, is not maybe in a very supportive environment, or is going through a stressful situation. Eating disorders can be a little bit like an illusion of control. So I can't control that, but I think I can control the way I eat. And you start to document what you eat.
That's definitely my
however,
case.
then
Definitely.
Because it's because I'm sitting here for probably one of the first times I'm sitting in a show with you beautiful ladies, we're all nodding and I'm hearing what you're saying, and I've heard it a number of times, but I am instantly taken back 30 years because this is obviously that element of control, being able to control something. You're nodding away.
Because that's the feeling that it was the only thing I had control over at 15 years of age. It made me feel powerful in a sense. And I needed that control. I felt like, as you were saying, I'm a very sensitive person. So the fact that I could control something for once was, for me, empowering. But until it was, really bad. And I hadn't noticed how bad it was at that time.
It's an irony, isn't it? Because you think that you're in control.
Yeah.
If I can control this, if I can cut down my calories, if I can have that just piece of apple, if I can have this, and I can control it, and I can fight against the hunger, which is what you mentioned, then I am in control. But it's the illusion, because it's actually controlling us.
Initially, it's very empowering, actually. And there's a term called the honeymoon period of like an eating disorder, because, especially if you're exercising, people actually go on a high because of the reward center of the brain. So I'm not eating, I'm losing some weight, and I'm exercising, and all the endorphins, and people comment, you're looking good, you look taller. So initially, the first few months are, and that is what the brain remembers, and the person wants to keep going back to that feeling.
You said about trauma, and you mentioned, Kaz, in your piece of writing, you mentioned about this 40-something kilos, you being told that you had to be, and this was part of something that you loved.
Yes.
This was part of your dance, and you loved it, and suddenly you're being told that you're too heavy. You've got to get down to 40 kilos for some. I mean, this is insane. Is this trauma as well?
It was told not in a sort of disciplinary way. It was told in like, wow, you're losing weight. I'm sure now you can reach that weight. So it was more of like, look, I'm sure this is what you can do. Listen, I'm sure there were good intentions, because they wanted me to succeed. And perhaps maybe 10 years ago, ballet, it's different than what it is now. Now there's more of an awareness, to even, in fact, by, I believe, Vogue, seriously, some models are being banned, for example. So, this awareness is growing. There are ballet dancers like Misty Copeland who are very muscular. I was really discouraged from running when I was studying dance full time. I was also running my first half marathon. And I don't know how I had the energy, but I was really discouraged from running. And I remember that our exams were done the Monday after the half marathon, because I was really discouraged from doing that. But I did it.
But why discouraged?
Because my muscles might change. My muscles might get bulkier, and there was a very controlling nature. Even I remember once I was very depressed while I was dancing full time. It was a very, very dark part of my life. And in the breaks, I used to read Harry Potter to cope. And then we were told, in your breaks, you have to stretch. I don't want you reading books that have nothing to do with ballet. Like, come on, it's just this toxic environment. And it's, sometimes I used to say, I didn't manage to dance, abroad for long seasons. And am I a failure because of that? But would I have wanted to stay in that environment? That would have made me very, very unhappy. So there are all these emotions that come with it, not only the weight. It's so
eating disorders the rates are higher among athletes, and among, in fact, there's another type of eating disorder as well, like specifically for female athletes. It's called the female athlete triad, and they're higher among dancers as well because of the mirror. And because dancers and athletes are put in categories. So sometimes I get, say, a boy, like telling me, but I cannot compete because I need to be lower in my weight. But how can you be lower can't you go in a category higher? No, because then I am too skinny to fit in that category. And they're being pushed to gain the weight, lose the weight, eat in this weight. And as we mentioned earlier, the minute you start playing with your food groups, your perception is going to change.
Explain that to me, because
Yes.
we're talking about food groups and perception.
Yes.
So what are the food groups and what's the perception?
What I mean by food groups, the main food groups, carbohydrates, fats, protein. And the minute you're being told you need to do something about your weight, very often is you need to lose the weight or you need to put on the weight. Sometimes I have people come because they want to put on the weight to fit in a certain fighting category, for instance. And now, the minute you stop nourishing your brain, because we forget that the brain is part of us, it's an organ. So when you're not eating well, you are not feeding your brain. And if the brain is not getting in the necessary nutrients, then you're not going to think right.
So could this be what you're discussing there? And I don't want to be impertinent, but you mentioned that you didn't, that your dancing period was dark. Could this have been because you were pushing yourself? Could this be because Kaz was pushing herself to an extreme and your brain wasn't functioning?
Possibly. And along with other factors, of course. I don't know the story, but yes, one of the reasons is definitely.
Even the expectations, I think, because I was really going for a professional level. And, I used to watch shows that, about dancers in a professional company, and it was so cutthroat and so there's so much jealousy. But I really wanted that because I love to perform, and it doesn't matter if I'm really unhappy in my real life, but then I'm on stage and it's some moment of euphoria. So I was willing to kind of, bypass that. But now I know that it's these unrealistic expectations. Like sometimes we say, if your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough. When in fact, we really have to put some pressure off of us. Because if maybe we don't make it, maybe if we don't go up there, we failed when even living day to day is a success,
That is beautiful, living happily day by day.
That's
and
it.
You mentioned a very important point, the unrealistic expectations. Women were always asked, to change their body. If we can think of foot binding, like there were many, but never as much as now.
Let's keep with that, because as I mentioned before, when we were sitting down and meeting each other and talking to each other, I happened to mention, I am now 50. I'm going to own this. I'm going out there. I'm 50. It's frightening, but I'm 50. But when I was growing up and I was affected by eating disorders, I think I've got a few years on you young ladies. And I grew up in a society where we had nothing like the pressure that we have now. I'm not saying that there wasn't pressure, but there was nothing. I mean, of course, we had Vogue and we had all these magazines and, films and Pretty Woman and, all these great films and that sort of thing. But the pressure to be Julia Roberts, she was an actress on TV. She was not in my house. She was not in my hand. She was not in my face. And even with that, I watched Pretty Woman. Go and see it again. It's a brilliant film. She isn't that skinny. She was not ridiculously skinny in that film. And I keep coming back to this fact. And this is why I'm so excited about Danae Mercer-Ritchie coming over, because she's calling out AI influencers who are not even real, who are being designed by men and taking money. I mean, we cannot achieve you talked about unreasonable expectations. We can't achieve this. I have no idea. Ladies, I'm asking you before I come to Dorothy, but what is it like being a young woman in 2024?
You mentioned men, and I was reading yesterday. I brushed up on some reading, and there is this phenomena called the Balanchine woman. So Balanchine was a famous choreographer in 1920s, something like that. I could be wrong. 1920s, 1930s. And basically he had this idea of a woman who he would allow in his company, who he would teach his choreographies to. However, this was taken way before that, even in the romantic era of ballet. Ballerinas were an ethereal, subject. They were flying, and people would go to the theater to escape the war and to escape all the hardships in their lives. And so the ballerina had to be light. There was a certain, and even I was telling Sarah before, the subject matters of these ballets. The prince would not fall in love with her, so she would die, and in someone like the same thing in Giselle, he wasn't in love with her, so she let her hair loose, she was driven crazy and she died, so my main point is that a lot of these were written and were choreographed around the male gaze. And we can think about a lot of media like that. I was watching a Brooke Shields advert of Calvin Klein from the 90s in very, sexualized positions and stuff like that. It's even how we dress ourselves, like my lips have to be a certain way. I have to shave my legs, otherwise I'm not going to resemble the models or,
But shaving your legs has been around for a long time. We still, 50 years ago, we were still shaving our legs, I can assure you. But the pressures that we have now, I don't believe I think they're much more invasive. I mean, for you as well, Sarah, are you feeling it? What does it feel like to be a woman in 2024?
I think we are having a lot of pressure from social media. It's a lot of, like you were saying, people are editing a lot of photos. Even if you, Instagram, there's filters, there are filters. Everyone is using these filters. They're not being themselves anymore. Filters which plump the lips, filters which put your eyes like cat eyes and stuff like that. Why aren't we being us anymore? Why do we have to use photo editing,
You're making me think of two shows. Both of you have mentioned two shows in this season. We started off this season with the male gaze, talking about the male gaze and male expectations on women. And we also talked about, we had a show on women in dating. And one of the young ladies, Ali, who was sitting right where you were saying, said that she went on a date and she turned up and the guy didn't even look like the person that's in the photo. So we us women don't own it. But you've all had that experience, I'm sure, where you've met
Yes, it happens.
where you've met someone on Instagram, and it could be a girl, it could be a guy, it could be anything. But I can certainly recount one experience where I sort of met someone on social media, a young lady. And when I turned up and I actually bumped into her, I did not recognize her at all. At all. I didn't even know. I walked past and she's like, "Hi, Trudy." I was like, "Huh?" We're doing this to ourselves. And I can tell you, I'm just going to say, the pressure doesn't come off when you get to 50. It's still there. You just get a tiny bit more realistic, I think. But is that daily? Are you seeing daily? You constantly...
For sure. I've seen people edit their figure as well, if they want a thinner waistline, it's so easy to just edit your photos, so and seeing also this being done on really famous people would trigger the young women
Yes.
nowadays.
And actually, because I do collaborate with some cosmetic surgeons, because sometimes an assessment is required prior to certain surgeries, and the people are actually going up to to surgeons, asking to look like their edited picture. Yes.
Sorry, so you're going up and saying, this is what I look like and I want to look like this, but...
Yes, they might want to alter, which then makes me think, but why? What is going on? Because, many things are contagious, so if somebody's doing, everyone's going to be doing it. And it's also because it's like social comparison is a constant. It's like being on a constant treadmill and you constantly need to compare and catch up and look like. which it's
So can I ask, I'm going to ask these ladies, I'm going to stick with the ladies before I come back to you, Dorothy. Do you yourselves, you don't have to answer, but I'm going to ask you if you can. Do you feel when you look on social media that you are being bombarded by unreal expectations on your feed? Are you affected by that?
I mean, yes, obviously, because sometimes it's even with me, with my friends. Sometimes we're just hanging out together and we say like, okay, let's take a photo together. We go to put like, we go to take the photo and they'll be like, no, let's put a filter on. So wait, what's happening here? Are we looking bad? And it affects you. We're not real anymore. That it shouldn't be that way, you know?
And I'm going to come to something that you said, Kaz, because it's really stuck in my mind. You looked at photographs, and you've been really honest by saying this, and I think you have resonated with everyone at the table because we've all felt this. And when I was saying, you've just run a marathon or you've just run a race and you're looking at the photographs of yourself afterwards and you're thinking, oh, I don't like this bit of me, I don't like this bit of me. Despite the fact that it's a post-race photo when you should be looking just a little bit shit, quite frankly. Because if you don't, you haven't run. But even I look at the photographs I wrote last year around the Xterra World Championships. I ran 42 kilometers up 2 mountains. And I look at the final photo and I'm like, and I work in Photoshop. I'm a graphic designer. Should I just tweak the thighs a little bit? Because that's where my problem area is. I mean, how do we get to this? I mean, we're resonating with you and I'm looking at you and you're a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful woman. And you're saying, well, I looked at the photos after the post race and you've had the honesty to say, actually, I didn't like them.
I think the people around us and society have really let us down, because even hearing you say that you ran 42 kilometers up a mountain, like, oh, that's insane, I would be so proud. And then you were concerned about your thighs. That's the illness, that's madness.
It's what we're being fed all the time. It is the messages that we get. What I like to say when we're doing therapy, who do you want to put as boards of judges in your life? Like, who do you want to be there? And we, start knocking off this designer, that influencer, because they're not real, they're human themselves. So who do you want over there? And I would put myself first, but not the critic. We work a lot on self-love, but then we look at people who wish me well. I remember your mom coming with you, all her love, and then your dad. Those should be there, not the Instagram face or which is unreal.
Meet Mineral 89 Booster, made of millions of minerals and the iconic hyaluronic acid. It's so fresh, so pure. It boosts skin strength by 71%. So powerful, we had to call it the Booster. By Vichy. Health is vital. Start with your skin. And wait, there is more.
So run this one past me again, because this sounds really profound. So you're basically saying that we should choose who we are trying to influence.
In reality, we should not be trying to influence, because you're already amazing the way you are. When you're born, your birthright one is to be happy. You're already perfect. Like there's nothing wrong with you. When you look at children, they don't see the differences until the differences are fed to them. They don't. They're happy, they play, and then they start to become aware. But why?
Okay, I'm going to stick with this for a second. So you've mentioned that children, and I'm sure that we can all say that as children, you are quite unaware At what point is a child going to get to a self-aware, a social aware, a biological aware age?
It's different for every child, and it depends very much on the family they live in. I don't know if you want to give your experiences to when you became aware, but now we have children as young as 4, saying the word fattening, or 5, is that fattening, because they hear it at home. So it depends very much what they hear and what they see. So if I am maybe saying one thing to the child, but then I am complaining myself, or I want to look better than, or tall, or let's edit the photo, or let's take a photo and change it, I'm already feeding all that to the child. So it depends on what you tell the child and how much you make them feel loved and supported and secure. And even when they are loved and supported, they can still develop an eating disorder, let alone when they're already being fed the idea that your success is equal to the way you look.
And this comes back to what you were saying, Sarah, because you were talking about a loss of control around 15 years old, but you also mentioned that you came to therapy with your mum and your family were super, super supportive. So it wasn't, your parents were there for you. They were helping you.
I had an amazing support system from them, honestly. At first, until they understood what I was going through, it was a bit difficult. It was a lot of shouting, a lot of fighting. It's because I was resisting the help that they were trying to give me. But then when my mom realized that I needed help, she tried to understand what my brain was going through, what I was going through. And that's where we said, okay, we're going to therapy together. We can do this together. And I think that was so powerful for us both, because I wanted her to be with me because I needed her help as well in this. And she wanted to be there because she needed help as well. She didn't know how to, be there for me all the time. She wanted to understand what I was going through. So it was like 2 times the help, kind of, when she used to come to therapy with me. I used to feel like I was recovering because she was coming to therapy sessions with me. So yes, it was an amazing experience that she was there with me all the time.
One of the things that you said in that was being uncomfortable in your clothes, wearing manly clothes, and you're talking about someone who's got a very slim, slender figure. Did people around you notice? Did people around you realize what was happening to you?
Recently, so no, they didn't. I mean, eating was never my trouble. It's more what I felt. I have a lot of depressive episodes because of it. At which point I don't want to continue living because I don't want to look this way. I cry myself to sleep. It's very intense. I would be out shopping and I would think, what am I going to have for lunch? And then I would think, wait, but I can't be excited about food anymore. And that would really mess with my mind, sometimes. There was a period about 3 years ago where I was a bit, I was a bit chubby and I wanted to lose weight. I did the 6-pack revolution and I was really happy. And I said, I'm going to continue going like this. If I ever become the size that I am again, like I don't even want to reach that point. But before I did, like, people were commenting, like they would see me after a long time. Like once someone said, like, wow, you've put on weight, or wow, are you going, you look different. But it was very obvious what they were saying, and even ex-boyfriends, it was a very, very big influence, like they would say, and I've written about this, that, if you ever get pregnant, keep training so you don't put on weight. My ex-wife, she had really put on weight, at one time. And it's a pressure that I don't want to become like that for the person I love. So it's a pressure from that side as well, So all these like ex-teachers,
Expectations,
exactly. your family tell you because they're looking out for you, but when you're told in a certain way that, putting on weight is bad, I don't want you to ever be like that kind of thing. It's have such a negative label on it. It's like, okay, so if I'm bigger, the less worthy I am, the more space I take up in the world, the less attractive and graceful I am. And that was the message I was always fed from a lot of people.
It makes me think of what you're saying just there, and I have such a heart for you. I have such a heart for both of you ladies and yourself, but I have such a heart for what you're saying, because I recently, on my 50th birthday, a friend of mine from school said, I found these photos of you, and she sent them to me, and I was wearing these big baggy clothes, and I had put on weight, because ultimately eating disorders is not necessarily long-term sustainable. We're talking about 10 years or so. There's going to be different periods where your weight fluctuates, and because it fluctuates for different reasons. And you made me think of an interview that I had with an amazing young lady, Emily Jones. I've interviewed her 3 times on this show. She put on a lot of weight when she was diagnosed with fibromyalgia and acute arthritis, inflammatory arthritis, and she literally couldn't move. And I've seen photographs of Emily when she was younger, and she put on a lot of weight. She is now in the process of losing that weight. But I'm telling you, she put on a lot of weight and went through the whole process of that and the psychology of that and how it affected her. And this woman is amazingly resilient under those situations. But I'm like with you. I'm going to just say, and I'm pretty sure with you too, Sarah, is that if I put on my jeans and I feel like I've put on a kilo, it affects the way I feel that day. And I don't know if every woman feels like that, and maybe they do. But if if I have a bit of stomachache or something like this, I get a little bit of irritation from lactose or gluten or something like that, or if I had some wine and you're a bit bloated the next day, it will affect my mood. I'm being honest with you. That is how it is. And that hasn't changed after 35 years. We still live with these challenges. And we are, if you have been, to some extent, still governed by these. They're hard demons to escape.
Yes, in fact, recovery is not defined in the same way by, clinicians and researchers sort of want to find a definition of recovery, but I always say it's very individual. How somebody make a full remission and they might not be, or affected, they can quickly transform it. And I like to say that therapy has to be in the long term, because then there's a maintenance phase where you are taught, what do you do now? Because people are going to start commenting. Like when you start to look better and people say, you're looking good, quickly the brain transforms it into, I must have put on weight. So you need to be very fast with remembering what we said you need to do. Same goes for when your jeans are tighter and you quickly say, well, maybe I had something very salty yesterday because I do not put on fat overnight.
But there are
quickly change it.
But there are certain medical conditions like inflammatory arthritis,
yes.
PCOS.
Yes, absolutely.
Other conditions that affect women.
Yes.
I can remember one of my very dark times, and relating to exactly what you just said. I was probably about early 30s. So I was quite a way out of my eating disorders period. And like you, I was in a relationship, and my then boyfriend was sort of going through an experience of endometriosis with me. And the recovery for endometriosis, or the managing of endometriosis, is Zoladex injections, which makes you put on weight. It takes you to the brink of menopause. And I put on weight. And the comments I had from him, and that took me back to that dark place.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes. And something else which you mentioned and is linked to this is that eating disorders, because we tend to think that anorexia is only for somebody who is underweight. Anorexia can exist in an overweight or obese body because it's the kind of thinking, it's not the weight. We diagnose it, as proper anorexia nervosa when there is underweight. The criteria for amenorrhea when you lose your period is no longer there, because some women do not go through that. They keep getting a period. However, we meet people whose weights are like, we would, if we had to use BMI, they would be overweight or obese, but their thinking is purely anorexic. So their mind is constantly preoccupied about weight, shape, image. They check themselves all the time in mirrors and glass. And so that is something that I wanted to say, because I can't go for therapy because we know that like 13% of women over 50 are battling eating disorders also because of the menopause. But only few of them reach health, go to healthcare professionals or else the professionals themselves wouldn't be trained to ask certain questions. Since I've been running this course, like we're training therapists into specializing in eating disorders, they tell me, since this course, I've started to ask. And immediately they tell me yes, because very often we don't ask about food. If somebody comes to me and we're not doing eating disorders, but maybe we're talking about a difficult life period they're going through, it's odd to ask, what do you eat in the day? But if you ask, not everyone, but many will tell you that they have an unhappy relationship with their food. And very often eating disorders are missed. Sometimes somebody comes and they tell me, like, I've been battling with bulimia for the past 9 months, but I never told my therapist, or I said it briefly, but we worked on another issue. And like, why is this? Because we don't assume that it could be dangerous, that it could be actually a disorder.
What's really interesting about what you just said, and is going to come back to both of you, is that both of you have very different situations. Both of you have a very different approach. We all at the table have a very different approach to this subject. We have one thing that's pulling us all together and we have in common in the middle, and that's, as you said, an unhealthy relationship with food. But it metamorphosizes itself in 4 different ways, or 3 different ways. And as you said, you've had your family support, your mum's been there, you had the trigger to control. There's some parts that resonate with that, some parts of your story that resonate with me, and I'm pretty sure that you have in the common area as well. But one thing that you were just saying there was about this perfect storm of everything that comes together, and how unique that is to each individual. So I'm assuming it's not quite as easy as to say, okay, somebody's behaving in this way, therefore they have an eating disorder or a bad relationship with food or a bad body dysmorphia issue, that it's all sorts of different components.
Yes.
But I do want to come back to a question I asked you before, and ladies, do jump in. Again, it comes down to the fact that these are 2 beautiful, very, very, very disciplined women. They're very, very disciplined. As I keep coming back to, going up in the air and doing what you're doing, or the diet you mentioned means that you have an extraordinary sense of self-control. Running a marathon, or being a dancer, or doing the controlling your diet, as you mentioned in your blog, and so on, is an extraordinary level of self-control. So I'm going to come back to a question I asked just a moment ago to kind of bring this perfect storm together. Is there common components? And I'm going to ask you guys, do you experience with friends? Can you identify in friends? Are there common components that create part of this perfect storm with regards to personalities and traits?
I mean, me as a dancer, I see it a lot in dancers, which is...
Yes, there's a higher rate in dancers.
I see it a lot. Whenever I speak to someone, I don't even mention it sometimes, and they tell me, like, today I just gained a kilo, so I'm not feeling well. Like, people are weighing themselves every time,
It's the weighing scales. We forgot to mention the weighing scales.
Yeah.
And
I used
for
to.
not being triggered anymore, because I'm amazed.
Oh,
Well done.
But as you said, it's a lot of years of therapy. It's not something I did from today to tomorrow, it wasn't
It's a
so
long
easy.
journey.
So it was a lot of therapy, it was a lot, and to not get triggered, it took a lot from me, I used to weigh myself after every meal. And obviously the weighing scale will go up because you're putting water weight in, you're putting food in you. So, but that used to trigger me, and I used to say, okay, then I have to burn this off. I have to burn this off. But what did I do? Later on, I knew that that was a source that was triggering me. So I removed the weighing scale. People nowadays, a lot of dancers who I know, are weighing themselves every day. Why? Why is this happening?
It's unnecessary.
Why does a number on the scale define you? It shouldn't. Like, it's not you. It's, a personality should define you. Like,
but then that comes back to what you were saying about who is your audience, who are the people around you that you are wanting to connect with, resonate with, or even impress. I mean, again, I'm coming back to what Kaz wrote and your part about, and I this is why it blew me away, because you guys are so blowing. Nothing has changed in 35 years, because I was the same. I would weigh myself before a meal, after a meal. You were talking about in your blog that you had a disciplined day, and then you weighed yourself the next day and the weight hadn't gone down, and you were like, what the hell? We've all done that. We've all been there. And now, and I, like you, have done Six Pack Revolution, which was great and fantastic. And it comes us right back to that strict diet, because Six Pack is very strict. It is and Scott, who has come up with this, is a good friend of mine. We come from the same town in the UK. And I have mixed feelings about this because of the way that it gets you compulsive. And when I did it, I was asked to weigh myself. And I said, I haven't weighed myself since I was 18 years old because I can't. And I didn't. Because for that reason, you have to give up the scales.
yeah.
Well, there is an element in one branch of therapy, because there are different schools and schools of thought. And in one of them, we say you need to make friends with your weight eventually. Because just to know, like, this is my weight, and free yourself of it. Because what happens, I'm going to give a real example. Somebody I was working with, she was not weighing herself, and if the nutritionist or myself would weigh her, would turn her around, because sometimes we need to know, the number, like what's happening, to see like muscle mass, fat mass, and then she was applying like for something that required a health insurance or a life insurance at the bank, and they weighed her and told her the weight. And that took her back. So, because she hadn't registered that, now, okay, I'm feeling good, but in her mind she weighed less than that number.
Yeah.
So then we say, if you really, really want to know your weight, then you weigh yourself once a week for 4 weeks and work the averages. This is not mine. This is coming from CBTE. It's like cognitive behavioral therapy enhanced. It's for eating disorders. And I find that really effective, because then people realize that actually my weight fluctuates all the time, and the points do not really matter, 0.8, 0.2, 0.1. That's fluid weight.
And we're also women. We have periods, for crying out loud.
And that is something else that comes in the psychoeducation. You will say, if you're bloated, please check, where you are in which week this is, because you're probably going to be bloated and weigh more. So,
can I ask both of you ladies as well? I'm absolutely loving this conversation. It's so therapeutic for myself, and I'm so glad to be with each of you. But I'm wondering how, you talked about your family being supportive, and you talked about your situation as well. How have your friends, how have we talked about the people that are our audience, how have your friends been related to you? Have your friends, you mentioned that your family didn't necessarily know that what you've been going through or what you have gone through. Have your friends been support networks for you?
I have always had a very supportive family and friends. When you just said just now, my family didn't know what was going on, and after I released the article, it was maybe 20 minutes later, I was at the post office. My dad called me and he said, wow, Cass, I just read your blog, and I was saying, like, oh my God, that's my daughter, and it's not something I want to tell everybody, I mean, people see me eating, but then there are like, maybe there's 2 weeks where I don't want to eat anything, like I'm hungry, but I'm on the sofa. Maybe I want to exercise, but I'm like really numb and I don't do anything. I don't to look at food. I don't to, I just can't move. And it's very strange. So I have like 2 weeks like that. And then I get, it happened 2 summers ago. I was trying not to eat as much as possible because I was going through a bad time. I didn't have an appetite and I was seeing myself slimmer in the mirror, probably my mind playing tricks on me. And then I had a drum lesson and I had to play this really fast, tempo. And I wasn't having the energy to do it. And I said, no, I have to start eating properly again. But having said that, there are people who they keep going. They don't have those realizations, So, and it's a lot of people have come up to me after I shared the article and they said like, oh my God, even I've struggled, with eating disorders. And it's so common, like from people it's super common.
I want to read in a second. I want to read an excerpt from your article from your blog. But if your parents, you say that your parents have been very supportive, your friends have been very supportive, and you also mentioned that it's not something you'd want to share with everybody, but you did, and you came out and said it. And I'm wondering what motivated you to do that, because I'm also sensing that there is still, and I don't know about you, Sarah, will come to you in just a second, but I think there's always a part of that experience that resonates, that continues to resonate, that still resonates for 35 years. There are still foods that I have that are on the don't eat list. I cannot eat biscuits. I cannot eat cake. Trying to explain to people why you do not want to eat your birthday cake.
Oh.
Which, just when I had my 50th birthday, I cannot eat it. It's a trigger food for me. I can't eat chocolate.
Okay.
And that's still, they go into the bad category. So I'm probably saying this for the first time and people are suddenly realizing why I don't eat chocolate, but it's a trigger food for me. And it's something that I've continued to live with and managed. And to be quite honest with you, it's not a problem. I can live without biscuits, cake and chocolate. It's not as if it's life-threatening or it's going to damage my health. But I'm wondering, coming back to your story, what made you decide to share so explicitly your story, and then what the response was from your friends and family? Because you just mentioned your dad didn't know.
So it was really bubbling. After going to mention the marathon again, I had to carb load, and I have PCOS, so my body doesn't metabolize carbs, and it happened. It was happening gradually. I was feeling myself and seeing myself, even the way my clothes were fitting. And I felt myself getting really, really swollen, pictures and everything. And I weighed myself finally, because I hadn't weighed myself in a while. And it was almost the weight before I had, I did the SPR meal plan. And I remember I always go back to those photos of before I started that plan, and I look at my face and I'm, oh my God, like I hate myself there. I never want to be that person again. And that's such a sad, something so sad to say. And it was all bubbling and festering, and I felt I had to get it off my chest. And I've always loved writing as well. And I always felt very therapeutic. So I said, let me give it a go. I was at work, and I was writing on a notebook, which felt really, writer's vibes. And I was really focused, and my friend looked at me. She said, "You're okay?" I said, yes, I'm just getting something off my chest, because I had a conversation with my friend. I woke up in the morning, I put on my baggy 90s, shirt, my baggy jeans. And as soon as I sat down, I told her, listen, I feel this and this. And we had a nice conversation, and I started writing. Because even my friends around me were telling me, that happens to me so much. Oh, my sister has, and I'm like, to hell with it. I'm gonna write. And, you know, a lot of people reached out, like a real lot of people. And I noticed how common it is. With my best friend, we send each other pictures of ourselves, and she's like, "Oh, look at my arm, look at my chin," and I'm like, "Oh, I know, man. Look at my legs, look at my," and we're always doing that. But putting it on paper is a relief. I got it out of my body, you know. And then even people offering help, people offering me advice was really nice. The fact that everyone is practically on the same boat. Someone reached out to me because they were self-conscious because they were too underweight and they never managed to put on the weight. So hearing all these stories was something beautiful as well. And
You said something just then, and I looked straight at Dorothy. I don't know if you picked it up too. You said you had to get it out of your body, not out of your mind, out of your body. And that just powerfully resonated. You got to get it out.
Out, yes. And because many say, I don't feel good in my skin. And what we work on is finding oneself. And it's not an easy process, but you need to feel good in your skin. And that is what would then take us back to childhood. But before we can go there, we need to heal the body, you know, like physically, and the brain, because then you're not reasoning. As you mentioned, you know, you had to go to hospital to sort of figure out that this is dangerous, something is happening. And then you need to commit to therapy. And once this process, you're doing both at the same time, you know, like the bit of the eating and the body and the bit of going back and see what the person can take and not take.
I'm going to come to Sarah's story in a second, because I absolutely love your beaming joy of you've gone down this journey. You went right to the point where you were hospitalized, and now you've been through therapy. And I want to encourage any woman to pursue that. Before we do that, and with your permission, I do want to read just a little bit of what you wrote, because it's incredibly powerful, and I'm fairly sure, and then I'm going to come to you, Sarah, because I'm fairly sure that you'll recognize this. But this is from your writings that is online, and you shared it, which is what I saw that got me heading towards this show, and that we could actually do this. And the writings is, I'd rather be dead than be a size 12. And this, I've just one paragraph from it. So I've decided to eat as little as possible. How much can I get away with? Fruit in the morning, carrots and hummus for lunch, an apple, and 2 rice cakes in the evening. I lose my appetite. Is it working? The headaches are unbearable. And surely I can stick it out for an acceptable summer body. I think it's working, but I feel hungry all the time. I try to fill myself with a piece of jalapeno cheese. Maybe I can go without having dinner. In fact, I haven't, and I feel proud of myself. The next morning, a slightly excited me rises to the scales, eager to learn the fruit of my efforts. I have no idea what my relationship with food is for the minute. There are days when I feel fine, but then there are days when it's all I can think about. Everything is out of focus, blurry, and I am numb. A sickening cycle followed by regurgitation of proverbial contents of my stomach. I mean, if there was ever a good way of describing what that journey sounds like, that is so insanely beautifully articulated. I think that resonates with so many women who are watching this.
Definitely. That sounded a lot like my story when I used to restrict, when I used to think about, you know, food all the time. When I used to go back up on the scales and see that nothing happened, so I used to restrict myself even more. So yeah, that's very powerful.
Let's stay with you, Sarah, because I know that your journey is part of the story with Dorothy as well. Yeah. So for women who are going through that, for every single woman who's just listened to that and that resonates, because that was, when I read that, it just, I mean, I'm choked up now because it really knocked me for 6. 35 years later, I'm still understanding what that feels like. And I think there's a lot of women that are watching this who will who will suddenly identify with what you've written there. So obviously you've gone through this journey. You find yourself hospitalized. Your heartbeat is 35 beats per minute, which is insane. And you decide, or someone decides, whether it's you or someone else, decides that something has to be done.
Yeah.
So talk me through that path.
Yeah, so when I was in hospital, it wasn't so good because they're not catered for eating disorders there, you know. The nurses used to force me to eat the food, and I had a really bad relationship with food that time, so it was getting worse in hospital. After a month in hospital, and it was getting even worse for me mentally, because I was being force-fed the food. My dad saw me struggling and said, listen, if we go out of here, you have to promise me we have to go to therapy, because it was getting bad. And I said, yes, I need to get out of here because it's really, really bad. But I mean, there I was getting stable. I mean, the doctors were trying to stabilize my weight, but mentally I was regressing. I was feeling worse, you know, because they weren't catering for me. They weren't trying to develop a relationship with food with me, you know. It's not just about the food. It's about, like Dorothy said, like, you have to see everything. So after we went out of the hospital, that's where I started therapy. And therapy has been the best decision in my life, honestly, because that's where life started for me.
So talk me through what therapy looks like, because even for a lot of women who are going through, young women, older women who are going through this, therapy is scary.
Yeah.
Because you do have to come to the point where you acknowledge, and it's why it was my first question. What is the relationship? What point did you get to that you knew that something was wrong? So obviously you got to that point when you were hospitalized, but that might be different for every single woman.
Yeah.
So talk me through that therapy process before we come to Dorothy, who's smiling away because she's part of your story. Yes. But tell me about the first therapy session that you went to.
Well, the first therapy session, Dorothy made me feel so comfortable, and she acknowledged how, like, empowering it is that you know, when you go to therapy, that's amazing that you want to work on yourself. So that's already a big thing that anyone should be proud of. And the first session, I remember crying my eyes out, and her being so sweet and so nice. I really didn't know that it was going to be that good, because I could talk and feel like someone's understanding me for once, because after all that experience, like having someone who you don't know, but who I felt that knew me forever, that felt like I was being seen, you know?
That was what I was coming to, because all the way through you're saying that, I'm thinking to myself, you're talking about in hospital not being understood.
Yeah.
And you've been talking about it as well, about different relationships that you've had with your friends and your family. It's all about being seen.
Yes, it's you know, the primary relationship, actually, you know, like if we go back to babies and childhood, they need to be seen. We talk about mirroring. And one thing, you can't do this type of therapy if you don't, I feel, you know, unless you have a lot of patience and a lot of love for each person that comes to you. There's statistics that shows that not many choose this path because it's considered to be one of the toughest, also because there are many comorbidities, especially with substance abuse and misuse. And like half of the you know, sufferers will also abuse or misuse a substance because of the weight or to calm their thinking. And what makes therapy special is that it's beautiful to see the unfolding before, you know, I would say, okay, I'm going to be with her for 3, 4, 5 years for sure. So that makes it beautiful. And this is why I don't accept many, I can't, because otherwise it's not special. It's
3 to 4 years.
a minimum.
Wow, that is a journey.
A long journey. And obviously they don't keep coming once a week, and then it becomes, like more distant. Each session is spaced. But yes, then there is the famous maintenance phase, because unless you learn how to maintain it, you're going to get triggered again.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So you've gone to therapy, you started seeing Dorothy, Dorothy's seen you. What happens then?
During therapy sessions, it wasn't just about food, honestly. We went through a lot of things, a lot of why am I feeling this way? It's about everything. It's not just the food. But then when we used to get to the source, we also developed this relationship with the food. And today I'm happy to say that I have a really good relationship with food. I love food. I love going out and eating. Before I used to be scared to go out to eat, honestly. I also had a nutritionist who used to guide me as well to get this relationship out again, which really, really helped as well. So it's not just about one person, it's a whole team. I had also doctors helping me out. So, and I'm really, really happy that now there's Darkenna Sahtek, which is amazing as well, because they all work as a team to help out anyone who is going through anything of this, And for a long time, I felt like the maintenance phase, I felt like, am I going to be triggered? Am I not? But by time I started to love myself more. And I honestly didn't used to talk about my journey so much. But I really wanted to come to this show today because I really want to inspire anyone who's going through this. I really want them to know that this life that they're living is worthy and that they can overcome anything. They really can. And it happens to me. I was at my worst and now I feel like I'm actually living. So
I'm so thrilled. I'm so thrilled.
Yes.
I'm going to just interject with something else that Kaz wrote that just echoes what you just said. I'm kind of speaking for you from your blog, but you also wrote in this blog, there is what I know from the bottom of my heart, that I'm beautiful, clever and talented. But there is a dark voice that tells me the very opposite. We need to be easier on each other to get rid of the voice that overcomes us all. I know that I'm not alone. And just as you, oh God, I'm crying. Because
I'm feeling emotional as well.
Listen, lots of people cry on the show. I'm not meant to. But as you're speaking and you're talking about that being seen and you're talking about overcoming this and you're talking about fighting something which is very, very real. And if you haven't been there, it's very alien. Yeah. But for someone who's in it and who can recognize someone else who's been there, it's so real and it's such a prison. And essentially, and I'm sure I'm going to hand over to you, Dorothy, for a second, but the part of the problem is we all at some point have to eat. And if your problem is with food, you cannot escape it. Yeah. We go right back to the beginning of the show, which is exactly what you said. You're trying to build a new relationship with your demon. And you need that.
Absolutely, yes, because food is living and living is life, being alive. Yes.
I want to just come to what you just said there, because there's a beautiful, beautiful kind of wrap up from what you just said. But I want to head towards closing thoughts. I'm going to ask, before we do the closing thoughts, Dorothy, I want to ask you for your input more into this journey. What if someone is able to identify that they're in the same place, that whether it's been an experience that Kaz has had, which was triggered by someone else's comments to her, or whether it was something that they can relate to, as Sarah's experience of having to maintain control, gain control, be in control. Either way, it's symptomatic in that it ends up in the same place. Guide somebody who's watching this show as what they can expect from their journey. What are the first steps for someone who's going through any of these?
So I like the word seen. So be seen. When you go to therapy, you will feel understood. And it doesn't necessarily have to be immediately going to the therapist, the psychologist, or the psychiatrist, because I want to say I don't work alone. There's a whole team, as we mentioned, but there is help out there. So it could be, going to your GP who knows you, and you open up a little bit. It could be, if you're at school, go to the school counselor, speak to a teacher, tell a friend. If you don't want to tell a parent, tell an aunt, but don't keep it to yourself, because it takes you nowhere. Even if you're thinking, I don't like the way I look, like you mentioned the photo, look at my arm, but according to who? Why? According to who? Now, if that is too elaborate and you can't do it on your own, there are many self-help applications as well, and there are many websites that support people who have just recognized that they could possibly have an eating disorder. You could start there, even some self-help books maybe, but do reach out, because then if you happen to go maybe to a GP or a nurse that you happen to know and has the background, they will guide you. And as we mentioned, there are many places, like Darrell Ken, for instance, they also have outpatient services, so people can go there. Do not keep it to yourselves.
Okay, we're going to share all of those details under here, under the screen here. You'll be able to find all of that right here. But that's the first step. The first step is going out, getting seen, and getting the help, and then taking it from there. I'm also assuming as well that if you don't find, and I keep saying this, but if you don't find the help that you need from the first place that you look for it, don't stop there, because it is very specific. Even though that this affects 8.6% of the population, it is very specific, and it is, well, it's the question, is it difficult to understand? Is it difficult for someone who's not been through a relationship with food, body dysmorphia, an eating problem, an eating disorder, I should say, is it difficult for them to understand?
I think a lot of people can resonate, a lot of, like, how often do we hear it? Like, my summer's coming, I have to kind of, eat a bit more. I think everyone is aware,
I think many can relate from our stories today. Many can relate. So also what I'd like to say, if you know deep down that you're doing something which is unrealistic and unsustainable, stop. And whatever you do, make sure it's sustainable, because going on these, training sprees or these diets that keep changing, every season we get a new one. If you can already tell that it's not sustainable, then you cannot do it for a lifetime, then it's going to lead you somewhere ugly. So go and reach out for help. I forgot to mention the nutritionists, for instance. They're a very good starting point, because they know about eating disorders and they will guide, but don't do it on your own.
As I said, we're going to share the details of where people can get help just under here. But I would like you ladies, you have been so brave and so powerful, each one of you, to be here and talk openly about your experiences. But I'd like to then ask you guys to give a word of encouragement or a thought to close.
So again, I really want every young girl, anyone who's going through an eating disorder or are harming themselves in any way, to see that their life is worthy, and they will find what their meaning is, in this life. And I'm sure that anything can be overcome, So, and something else that I used to live by also in this recovery journey was, nothing feels better as healthy feels. So, yeah, so I used to think that being skinny felt so good, restricting my calorie intake felt really good. But now that I am enjoying eating, going out and feeling healthy, I'm training, I am living my life, I'm feeling strong, nothing feels more beautiful than that, honestly.
What a beautiful way to closing thoughts. Kaz, you said so much in that blog, and I've read, you've been so gracious and let me read it here on this podcast, but do you have any further closing thoughts?
I do. I want to say that we should stop comparing ourselves to others, because we're not, a famous actress who has personal chefs and, personal trainers. I am a teacher who goes from school to school, and sometimes I have to go and buy something to eat from outside. We are not those people. So, and even something else I wanted to say is that once a friend told me that our body has a history, and that really helps me when I think about it. So if you're a mother, you have a history, you bore your child in your womb. If maybe I just ran the marathon, my body has that in it, and we have to think that instead of looking at our weight, let's look at how strong our body is, like you said, let's look at how healthy we are. And if your boyfriend says that you're fat, leave him.
Yes,
Absolutely.
on that one.
Absolutely. I was going to say so. Then
Absolutely. I
he's
think that
not
was
the one for you.
one of the wisest words I've ever heard on this show. Too damn right. Absolutely. And what a beautiful way to close your thoughts. That's fantastic. For you, Dorothy, closing thoughts.
Hope. I always say keep going, like hope. Don't give up. Don't give up. Because recovery is possible.
You don't need to say any more. Cheers, ladies. I want to say thank you so much for being so candid, so absolutely open and honest. And here's to hope.
Hope.
Oh man, you guys got me in tears.